The silence of Stirling Manor was usually my greatest comfort, a testament to the life my late husband, Arthur, and I had built over 40 years of relentless work. It was a silence bought with steel and concrete, the foundations of the construction empire that had given us this sprawling estate in the most exclusive enclave of the Hamptons. But lately, that silence had curdled. It had soured into something heavy and oppressive, a thick blanket of isolation that seemed to trap the air in my lungs. I am Carmen Stirling. At 68, I am not a woman easily frightened. I have stared down union strikes, hostile takeovers, and the death of the only man I ever loved. Yet, as I sat in my wingback chair in the library, watching the autumn rain lash against the French windows, I felt a tremor of unease that had nothing to do with the cold. My son, Michael, was my pride, my joy, and my greatest vulnerability. He was a man of the sea, a senior structural engineer for a massive offshore drilling company. His work took him away for weeks at a time, leaving him isolated on steel platforms in the middle of the churning Atlantic. He was brilliant, kind, and hopelessly naive when it came to the matters of the heart. That naivety had a name: Sophia. Sophia was his wife of 2 years. To the outside world, she was the perfect partner for a man of Michael's status. She was young, undeniably beautiful with her cascading dark hair and doe-like eyes, and possessed a voice that could drip honey when she wanted something. But I saw what Michael refused to see. I saw the way her eyes darted to the price tags of the gifts he bought her before she even smiled. I saw the way she treated the staff, my housekeeper, Maria, and the gardener, Jose, with a sneering condescension that vanished the moment Michael entered the room. She was a chameleon, painting herself in the colors of a devoted wife, but underneath, I sensed a gray, empty hunger. But I kept my peace. A mother who criticizes her daughter-in-law is a cliché, a villain in the story of young love. I bit my tongue, opened my home to them, and prayed that Michael would eventually see the cracks in the porcelain doll he had married. It was a Tuesday in late November. The weather had turned violent, a nor'easter battering the coast with gale-force winds and freezing rain. Michael had deployed to the rig just 48 hours prior. The house felt cavernous with just Sophia and me. We had eaten dinner in a strained silence, the only sound the clinking of silver against china. Sophia had been twitchy all evening, checking her phone under the table, her leg bouncing nervously. "Is something wrong, my dear?" I had asked, dabbing my mouth with a linen napkin. "No, Carmen. Just the storm. It makes me anxious," she had replied, her smile tight and unconvincing. At 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a desperate, sustained press that echoed through the foyer like a scream. Maria had gone home for the night. I reached for my cane. My knees weren't what they used to be, but Sophia was already up. "I'll get it," she exclaimed, a little too eager, rushing toward the front door before I could even stand. I followed her, my cane tapping rhythmically on the marble floor. By the time I reached the grand foyer, Sophia had already opened the heavy oak door. A gust of wind and rain blew in, scattering the dried leaves from the porch across the pristine floor. Standing in the threshold was a figure that looked like he had been spat out by the storm itself. He was tall, looming over Sophia. He wore a soaked denim jacket that had seen better days, frayed at the cuffs and stained with grime. His jeans were torn, not in the fashionable way, but from wear. A dirty canvas backpack hung from one shoulder. Water dripped from the brim of a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, pooling on my expensive rug. But it was his face that arrested me. It was a hard face, etched with the kind of lines that come from trouble, not age. He had a scruffy beard and tattoos creeping up his neck like ivy, dark, indistinct shapes that disappeared into his collar. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the high ceiling of the foyer. I tightened my grip on my cane, my other hand instinctively moving toward the alarm panel on the wall. Sophia turned to me. Her face was a mask of tragic desperation. Tears were already streaming down her cheeks, mixing with the rain that had blown in. She gripped the stranger's wet sleeve with both hands, pulling him inside. "Mom. Carmen, please, don't be mad," she sobbed, her voice trembling. "This is Xavier. He is my brother." I froze. Your brother? You told Michael you were an only child. You told us your parents passed away when you were a teenager and you had no one. I lied, she wailed, creating a spectacle of misery. I was ashamed. Carmen. My father. He had another family. A secret family. Xavier is my half-brother. We lost touch years ago. He's had such a hard life. He's been trying to get back on his feet, but... She looked at the man, Xavier, with a look of pained adoration. He just got evicted. His landlord threw him out into this storm. He has nowhere to go. He called me from a payphone, desperate. I couldn't leave him on the street. He's my blood. Xavier took off his cap. His hair was matted and wet. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw a flash of cold assessment in his dark eyes, scanning the foyer, the crystal chandelier, the artwork on the walls. It was the look of a wolf entering a sheep pen. Then, just as quickly, he slumped his shoulders, adopting the posture of a beaten man. I'm sorry to intrude, he mumbled, his voice gravelly. I told Sophie not to bother you. I can go find a shelter. No. Sophia cried, clinging to him. Carmen, please. Look at him. He's freezing. Just for a few days. Just until the storm passes and he can find a job. I promise he won't be a bother. He can stay in the guest room in the West Wing, the one near the patio. You won't even know he's here. Please, for Michael's sake. Michael would want us to help family. That was the dagger. She used my son's name as a weapon. She knew that Michael, with his heart of gold, would never turn away a relative in need. If I kicked this man out into a hurricane, Sophia would paint me as a monster to my son. She would drive a wedge between us that might never heal. I looked at Xavier again. I smelled the stale tobacco smoke clinging to his wet clothes. I saw the mud on his boots. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. But I was trapped by social convention and maternal love. Fine, I said, my voice like ice. He can stay. But only for 2 weeks, Sophia. Until Michael returns from the rig. And he is to look for employment every single day. I will not run a boarding house for vagrants. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Carmen. Sophia rushed to hug me, wetting my silk blouse with her tears and the rain from her clothes. Xavier just nodded, a small, triumphant smirk playing on the corner of his mouth before he hid it. Thank you, Mrs. Sterling, he said. You won't regret this. I didn't answer. I turned and walked back to the library, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I already regretted it. The invasion began the next morning. The atmosphere of the house, usually light and airy, became heavy with a masculine, predatory presence. Xavier did not behave like a grateful guest who had been saved from the streets. He behaved like a man who was staking a claim. I woke up at 7 a.m., as I always did, to have my tea in the sunroom. Usually, the house was silent until Sophia emerged around 10. But today, the kitchen was a disaster zone. There were dirty plates piled in the sink, encrusted with egg yolk. A carton of milk had been left open on the counter, spoiling in the warmth. The smell of burnt bacon hung in the air. And there was Xavier. He was sitting at my breakfast table, feet propped up on an adjacent chair, feet still clad in those filthy boots. He was wearing one of Michael's robes. My breath hitched. He had gone into my son's closet and taken his clothes. Morning, Carmen, he grunted, not bothering to stand or remove his feet. He was eating an apple, biting into it with a loud, wet crunch. It is Mrs. Sterling to you, I snapped, walking over and shoving his feet off the chair with the tip of my cane. And those boots do not belong on my furniture. Nor does that robe belong on your back. Xavier laughed. It was a low, dry sound. Relax, Mrs. S., Sophie said Mike wouldn't mind. Whatever belongs to family, right? My son's name is Michael, I corrected him, shaking with suppressed rage. And you will clean up this mess immediately. Maria is not your maid. He stared at me then, chewing slowly. His eyes were devoid of any respect. They were flat, dead eyes that had seen violence and liked it. "Sure thing," he said, taking another bite. Later. I retreated to my study, locking the door behind me. I spent the day trying to work on the accounts for the charity foundation I managed, but I couldn't focus. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Over the next 3 days, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Xavier was a pollution. He smoked in the guest room, filling the West Wing with the acrid stench of cheap cigarettes, despite my strict no-smoking rule. He blasted loud music that shook the walls. When I confronted Sophia, she made excuses. "Oh, Carmen, he's just stressed," she would say, avoiding my eyes. "He's trying to quit smoking. Please be patient. He's had such a traumatic life." But it wasn't just the rudeness. It was the dynamic between them. It was wrong. It was visceral. Siblings share a bond, yes, but there are boundaries. There is a comfortable distance. With Sophia and Xavier, there was a magnetic pull that made the air crackle whenever they were in the same room. I began to observe them like a hawk. I noticed the way Xavier looked at her when she walked away, his eyes dropping to her hips, lingering there with a hunger that was anything but brotherly. I noticed the way Sophia giggled around him, a high-pitched, girlish sound she never made with Michael. I noticed the way they would freeze when I entered a room, their hushed conversations dying instantly, replaced by loud, forced comments about the weather or sports. On Saturday afternoon, the 4th day of his stay, I witnessed something that made my skin crawl. I was walking past the media room. The door was slightly ajar. The television was on, but the volume was low. I peered through the crack. Sophia was sitting on the leather sofa, holding a glass of wine. She looked flushed, her cheeks pink. Xavier was standing behind the sofa. His hands were on her shoulders. He was massaging her. But this was not a comforting squeeze between siblings. His large, rough hands were kneading her flesh with a slow, sensual rhythm. His thumbs dug into the base of her neck, then slid down, tracing the line of her collarbone, his fingers brushing dangerously close to the neckline of her blouse. He leaned down, his mouth inches from her ear, whispering something I couldn't hear. Sophia didn't pull away. She leaned back into him, her eyes closed, her lips parted. She let out a soft moan, a sound of pleasure that I recognized. It was the sound of a woman with her lover. I slammed my cane against the doorframe. Bang! They sprang apart as if a grenade had gone off. Sophia jumped up, spilling wine on the carpet. Xavier took a step back, his face darkening with annoyance, not shame. "Carmen." Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me. What is going on here?" I hissed, stepping into the room. I felt like I was going to vomit. "Is this how brothers touch their sisters in your family?" Sophia's face went crimson. He was just helping me with a knot in my shoulder. He used to work as a physical therapist. Don't be disgusting, Carmen. Physical therapist? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yesterday you said he was a mechanic. Before that, a construction worker. His resume seems to change as often as your excuses. I turned my cold gaze to Xavier. Keep your hands to yourself in my house. And Sophia, clean up that wine. It's a vintage Merlot, not that you would know the difference. I turned and walked away, my back straight, but my hands were trembling uncontrollably. I went straight to my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed and dialed Michael's number on the satellite phone. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to know I wasn't going crazy. "Hey, Mom." Michael answered, the background noise of drilling machinery loud in the receiver. "Is everything okay? You sound breathless." "I'm fine, Michael," I lied again, the faucet tasting like ash in my mouth. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not without proof. If I accused his wife of incest or infidelity without hard evidence, he would hate me. He would think I was a jealous, senile old woman trying to ruin his happiness. I wanted to ask you something. Did Sophia ever talk about her childhood? About siblings? Siblings? Michael laughed. No, Mom. She was an only child. Her parents died in a car crash when she was 18. That's why she's so attached to you and me. We are her only family. Why do you ask? The room spun. No reason, dear. Just looking through old photo albums. I love you, Michael. Be safe. Love you too, Mom. I hung up. An only child. She had told him she was an only child. The man in my guest room was not her brother. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. If he wasn't her brother, and they were touching like that, they were lovers. They were playing us. They were playing Michael for a fool and me for a host. They had brought her lover into my home, to eat my food, drink my wine, and sleep under my roof while my son risked his life on an oil rig to pay for it all. The rage that filled me was cold and clarifying. I stopped shaking. I stood up and looked at myself in the vanity mirror. I saw the wrinkles, yes, the silver hair, the age. But I also saw the eyes of the woman who had helped build a dynasty. They thought I was a fragile old lady. They thought I was blind to their game. I would show them. But I needed proof. Irrefutable, undeniable proof. I took 2 of my strong sleeping pills. I am going to pass out for the next 12 hours. Please, do not disturb me under any circumstances. Sophia's eyes lit up. It was subtle, but I saw it. A flash of excitement. Oh, poor Carmen, she cooed. Go to sleep. Don't worry about anything. We'll keep it down. Good night, Xavier grunted, pouring himself another glass. I slowly climbed the stairs, making sure each step creaked. I went into my room, slammed the door loud enough for them to hear, and locked it. But I didn't go to bed. I waited. I sat in my velvet armchair in the dark, staring at the luminous dial of my clock. 9 p.m. 10 p.m. 11 p.m. The house went quiet. The lights downstairs were turned off. I heard Sophia coming up the stairs, going into her room, the master suite she shared with Michael. I heard Xavier go into the guest room down the hall. Silence settled over the house. Midnight passed. Then, at 12:30 a.m., I heard it. The soft click of a door latch. I pressed my ear against my door. Footsteps. Soft, padded footsteps moving not towards the bathroom, but down the hallway. Then another door opening. Whispers. And then, the sound of 2 people moving together towards the staircase. They were going downstairs. I waited another 2 minutes to be safe. Then, I opened my door. I didn't turn on a flashlight. I didn't need one. I positioned myself in the shadows of the dining room, invisible to anyone inside, and peered through the crack. The scene before me made bile rise in my throat. Sophia was sitting on the center island, the granite counter my husband had imported from Italy. She was wearing a sheer silk nightgown, one Michael had bought her for their anniversary. Her legs were wrapped around Xavier's waist. Xavier stood between her legs, fully dressed but disheveled. He was kissing her neck, his hands roaming freely over her body, grasping, claiming. God, I missed you, Harvey, Sophia moaned, tilting her head back, her eyes closed in ecstasy. I can't stand it anymore. Life insurance. Are you sure the plan will work? Sophia asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, but in the silence of the night, it was deafening. Michael is careful on the rig. Xavier pulled back to look at her. He smirked, tracing her lip with his thumb. Accidents happen on oil rigs all the time, Sophie. A loose bolt, a slippery walkway, a fall into the freezing ocean. I have a buddy on his crew. He owes me a big favor. $450,000, he'll make sure Michael slips one night when nobody is looking. Sophia smiled, a smile of pure, unadulterated evil. $5 million, she whispered. And the house. And everything she has. And us, Xavier said. Cancun. No more hiding. They kissed again, a seal on their pact of murder. I stood there in the dark, my hand clutching the fabric of my robe. My son. They weren't just stealing my wine or sleeping in my beds. They were planning to kill my son. My Michael. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. My fingers felt numb, clumsy, but fear gave me focus. I opened the camera. I tapped video. I lifted the phone to the crack in the door. The red dot started blinking on my screen. I recorded them. I recorded the kisses. I recorded Xavier's hand sliding under her gown. I recorded Sophia saying, "I can't wait until he's dead so we can be together." I recorded Xavier detailing how their accident would look. I held the phone for 3 minutes. 3 minutes that felt like 3 lifetimes. Tears streamed down my face, silent and hot. This was the woman my son adored. This was the monster he slept next to. Finally, Xavier picked her up off the counter. "Let's go to the living room," he growled. "More space." I pulled back instantly, retreating into the deep shadows of the pantry alcove just as the kitchen doors swung open. They walked right past me, wrapped in each other's arms, heading towards the living room, oblivious to the witness in the dark. Once they were gone, I sprinted, or moved as fast as my old legs could carry me, up the stairs. I made it to my room, locked the door, and slid the deadbolt. I collapsed against the door, clutching the phone to my chest, gasping for air. I looked at the screen. The video was saved. I had the weapon. Now, I had to pull the trigger. But I couldn't just call the police yet. If I called them now, Xavier might get violent. He might hurt me before they arrived. Or worse, he might claim it was just an affair, and the murder plot was just pillow talk. I needed to ensure they went away for life. I needed to ensure Michael saw this with his own eyes, so his heart would break once, cleanly, rather than being poisoned slowly for the rest of his life. I checked the calendar on my wall. Michael was coming home in 2 days. Sunday. I wiped the tears from my face. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the storm that was still raging outside. It matched the storm inside me. "You want to play games, Sophia?" I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling with a cold, ruthless fury. "You want to kill my son? You picked the wrong mother to mess with." I sat in my chair and watched the sun come up. I didn't sleep a wink. I was plotting. Sunday lunch. The welcome home feast. That was when I would serve them their last meal. The 48 hours that followed that night in the kitchen were the longest of my life. I felt like a spy in enemy territory, except the enemy was sleeping down the hall and eating at my table. I had to summon every ounce of strength I possessed to maintain the charade. I was no longer just a mother or a widow. I was an actress performing for an audience of 2 psychopaths. On Friday morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Sophia making coffee. She looked radiant, humming a tune, her skin glowing from the previous night's illicit activities. When she saw me, she smiled, that saccharine, empty smile that I now knew hid a murderer's heart. "Good morning, Carmen. How is your migraine?" she chirped, reaching for the sugar. "Better," I lied, my voice steady. "The sleep helped. And you? Did you sleep well?" Sophia didn't even blink. Like a baby. It was so quiet last night. I gripped my cane until my knuckles turned white. "Quiet," she called, plotting my son's murder quiet. "That is good," I said, moving to the kettle. "Enjoy the quiet while it lasts, Sophia. Storms often return when you least expect them." She paused, a flicker of confusion crossing her face, but she dismissed it quickly. She was too arrogant to believe I was capable of threatening her. To her, I was just the ATM, the obstacle, the old hag. Xavier was even worse. He strutted around the house with a newfound arrogance. He started talking about future renovations for the estate. "You know, Carmen," he said over lunch, his mouth full of sandwich, "this patio needs to be redone. Maybe some Italian marble. When Michael gets back, I'm going to pitch him some ideas. I think I'll be sticking around for a while." "I am sure you have big plans, Xavier," I replied, sipping my tea. "But life has a way of changing plans." I spent Saturday locked in my study. I wasn't hiding, I was preparing. I transferred the video file from my phone to my encrypted cloud storage, then to a USB drive, and finally to my iPad. I created 3 backups. I wasn't taking any chances. Then, I called my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. I didn't give him details over the phone. I didn't trust that they weren't listening, but I told him to have a private security detail and the local police chief on standby for Sunday afternoon. Serious allegations, Carmen? Henderson had asked. Capital crimes, Arthur, I had replied. Just be ready. Sunday arrived with a sky of brilliant, deceptive blue. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and cold. It was the kind of day that promised new beginnings. For Michael, it would be the beginning of a nightmare, but at least he would wake up alive. I dressed with meticulous care. I chose a suit of steel grey wool, my pearls, and my most uncomfortable heels. I applied my makeup like war paint. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a victim. I saw the executioner. Michael's car pulled into the driveway at 1 p.m. I watched from the window as he stepped out of the black SUV. He looked tired, his face lined with the exhaustion of 2 weeks on the rig, but his eyes lit up when he saw the house. He dropped his bags and stretched. Sophia ran out the front door, putting on the performance of a lifetime. "Baby," she screamed, launching herself into his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist, kissing him passionately. I watched from the window, bile rising in my throat. Judas, I thought. She kisses him with the same mouth she used to sentence him to death. Xavier followed her out, leaning casually against the doorframe, hands in his pockets. When Michael put Sophia down, Xavier stepped forward, extending a hand. "Welcome back, brother. Heard you had a rough rotation." "Yeah, brutal," Michael said, shaking Xavier's hand warmly. "Good to see you, Xavier. Thanks for keeping the girls company." "Anytime, man," Xavier smirked. "Anytime." I walked out onto the porch. Michael looked up and smiled, a genuine, warm smile that broke my heart. "Mom." He walked up the steps and hugged me. He smelled of sea salt, industrial soap, and home. I held him tighter than usual, refusing to let go for a long moment. I was holding the ghost of the boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. I was about to inflict a wound that no bandage could fix. "Welcome home, my son," I whispered. "Good to be home, Mom. I'm starving." Sophia said she made a feast. "She did," I said, pulling back and smoothing his collar. "But I have prepared a special appetizer." We moved to the dining room. The table was groaning under the weight of the food Sophia had ordered. She hadn't cooked a thing, of course, but she had plated the catered roast beef beautifully. There were bottles of expensive wine, fresh flowers, and crystal glasses sparkling in the sunlight. It was a tableau of domestic perfection. We sat down. Michael at the head of the table. Sophia on his right. Xavier on his left. I sat opposite Michael, at the other end. "So," Michael began, pouring wine for everyone. "How was the week? Did you guys have fun? Xavier, did you have any luck with the job hunt?" Xavier took a sip of wine, looking relaxed. "Actually, yeah. I have a few leads. But I was thinking, maybe I could help you out around here for a bit longer? Fix up the place? Sophie says you need a new deck." Michael nodded, chewing his roast beef. "That's generous of you. We can talk about it. Family helps family, right?" Sophia reached out and squeezed Michael's hand, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're so good to us, baby. We are so lucky to have you." I cleared my throat. The sound was sharp, cutting through the warm chatter. "Before we continue," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the long table, "I have a small welcome home gift for you, Michael." Michael looked surprised. "Mom, you didn't have to get me anything." "It isn't bought," I said. "It is something I made. I have been learning how to use the new smart TV technology. I wanted to make a montage of family memories." Sophia smiled condescendingly. "Oh, that's sweet, Carmen. Did you figure out how to use the iPad?" "I did," I said, my eyes locking onto hers. It is amazing what technology can capture these days, even in the dark. Sophia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A shadow of doubt crossed her eyes. You know technology these days. Don't touch me. Michael roared. He swiped his arm, knocking her hand away. I heard you. That was your voice. You talked about the rig. You talked about the insurance. He turned to Xavier. The betrayal in his eyes was replaced by a murderous rage. And you, brother. I shook your hand. I gave you my clothes. Xavier realized the game was up. His demeanor changed instantly. The fake humility vanished. He stood up, kicking his chair aside, puffing out his chest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a switchblade. The blade clicked open with a menacing snap. All right, enough. Xavier yelled. Sit down, pretty boy. You too, old lady. Nobody moves. Sophia screamed. Xavier, what are you doing? Shut up, you idiot. Xavier snapped at her. The gig is up. We take the cash, the jewelry, and the car keys, and we leave. Now. He lunged toward Michael, the knife glinting in the sunlight. Michael, look out. I screamed. But Michael didn't back down. He was a man who worked on oil rigs, wrestling steel in hurricanes. He didn't flinch. As Xavier thrust the knife, Michael sidestepped with surprising speed. He grabbed Xavier's wrist, twisting it violently until the bone snapped with a sickening crack. Xavier howled, dropping the knife. Michael didn't stop. He punched Xavier in the face, once, twice, 3 times. It was a release of pure, primal fury. He was mourning the life he thought he had. How did you know? He finally asked, his voice hoarse. A mother always knows, I said softly. I saw how she looked at him. I saw how she looked at you. And when you told me she was an only child, I knew I had to become the monster to catch the monster. Michael looked at me. His eyes were red, swollen, and full of pain, but they were clear. You saved my life, Mom. They were going to kill me. I would burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you, I replied. He leaned his head on my shoulder, and for a moment, he was a little boy again. What do we do now? He asked. I looked at the sprawling estate, the empty driveway, the sun setting over the trees. Now, I said, standing up and offering him my hand. We change the locks. We burn the sheets in the guest room. We hire a lawyer to annul this marriage. And then, we eat dinner. Because I paid a fortune for that roast beef, and I refuse to let those parasites ruin a good meal. Michael looked up at me. A small, weak smile touched his lips. He took my hand and stood up. You're terrifying, Mom, he said. I know, I smiled, patting his cheek. That's why you're still alive. We walked back inside and closed the heavy oak door, locking out the world, the lies, and the past. The house was silent again, but this time, it wasn't the silence of secrets. It was the silence of safety. And it was beautiful.